This conference will now be recorded.
Oh, it just told me it's now recording. Maybe I started too soon. Anyway, the recording will just miss my introduction, I guess. So that's kind of my history. I've done a lot with Excel in the past, used it extensively, still use it today, along with some much larger server level solutions. My hope today is to give you a small idea of managing data and data sets inside of Excel. I know people have kind of a large variety of experience with Excel, beginning to expert users. So feel free to reach out with questions. I'm going to try to kind of hit on some points kind of for all levels. So hopefully there's something for everybody as we go through this. And feel free to chat me up if you can't get through with a question with your microphone, or whatever the case. Don't hesitate to ask questions. Stop if you can't hear me. Whatever works. Let's just start inside of Excel. And before I get into what we have here, I want to point out something dealing with editing data inside of Excel. If you look down here, see this little ready mode. This is the mode Excel is currently in. As soon as I start typing in a cell, that switches to enter. So this tells me how I'm interacting with data inside of a cell. If I hit enter, it goes back to ready. Quick way to edit data inside of a cell. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
The screen we see is notes. I don't see an Excel screen.
Well, now you just know the ending from the beginning. I guess we don't need the class. Let me try again. Click on my Excel screen. All right. Now do we see Excel?
Yeah, that's better.
Sorry about that. Let's try again. Looking down here, there's this sign that says ready. This is the mode that you're in, your editing mode. If you start typing in a cell, you'll see that it changes to enter. I'm in the entering mode. If I press enter, it'll go back to ready. When you want to edit data that's inside of a cell, you can come up here and click. You can double click inside the cell, and you see that it goes to this edit mode. A quick way to get there, if you want to keep your hands on the keyboard, is just to press F2. F2 jumps you into this edit mode where I can start changing data inside of my cell. And you notice when I move left and right, the cursor moves left and right inside of the cell. If I'm in edit mode, left and right is going to keep me inside of the cell. If I press F2 again, you can see now I'm in enter mode. And if I press left and right, it moves me out of the cell. So if you ever get confused, sometimes you don't know whether you're editing data inside the cell. When you press left and right, are you going to stay inside? Or are you going to move around? Just look for that mode icon down there to let you know, am I entering data or am I pressing F2 editing data? Editing is going to keep you in the cell. Press F2 again. Enter is going to move you when you move your arrow keys. If you type in a function by pressing equals, it immediately moves you to the enter mode, which typically allows you to move inside of a cell. But enter mode combined with the equal sign when you press an arrow key is going to allow you to add a cell to your function here. So if I had a function like a VLOOKUP, then I can go choose which cells I'm going to add to my function. And you see that it says point. So again, that enter mode combined with an equal sign, and then you press an arrow key is going to change you into the point mode, and that's where you are right here. So again, just quick thing to notice, Excel tells you what mode you're in. If you're afraid of, you're inside a cell and you don't know if you're in point mode or if you're in edit mode or enter mode, and then if you press the left and right, you might blow your function out and have to retype the whole thing. That's a quick way to make sure you know what you're doing inside of a function or cell or anything like that. Let's talk about data here for a second. There's something called flash fill. So if I type in, let's just delete the whole thing here. If I type in 1, 2, 3, and I highlight these, you see if I drag this down, it starts to fill it out for me. Excel sometimes can be smart and know where you want to go. You can do the same thing with days of the week. It figures, oh, he's probably trying to do the days of the week. It does the same thing for months. What it doesn't do it with is the alphabet. You see, it's just going to repeat my ABCs over and over again. So sometimes it's really smart. It's a quick way to fill in data. Other times, it can't quite figure out what you want to do. Flash fill, quick way to enter data. I don't know if you noticed me jumping around. You can see I can jump from side to side and around here. If I press Control right, Control left, it's going to jump me to the edges of a given set of data. If I have more data over here, and I press Control left, it'll jump me to that next set, right? To the end of my current set, and then to the next set of data. So Control arrow keys, really quick way to move around. You can do the same thing with Control End and Control Home. Thinking of everything as a square, it's going to take you to the far edge of your data set. If you hit Control End, Control Home will take you back to the top of your data set. Some quick navigation functions there. Adding rows, getting rid of columns. If you press Control Space, you'll highlight an entire column. If you press Shift Space, you highlight an entire row. So if I want to get rid of a column, I press Control Space, and then I press Control minus, and it goes away. If I want to add a column, Control Space, Control plus. I can add a column really quick or get rid of it. And it's the same thing with rows. I want to add a row, Shift Space, Control plus, Control minus. I found working in Excel, the more I could keep my hands on the keyboard, the faster I could get things done. Moving back and forth to the mouse really takes a toll if you're doing a lot of work in Excel. So sometimes having the hotkeys on the keyboard help a lot, especially as far as navigation goes. Using the idea of our data set here, let's talk a little bit about where we get data from and how we can do that in Excel. This is just a set of data I made up. Usually you get data from other sources. Somebody sends you a table of data they've recorded answers to questions in a survey, or there's cells of a given item from a company, and it's somehow arranged in a way to show you each record. You know, we had one cell on this day, we had another cell on this day, we had 3 cells on the same day. It's going to arrange things inside of records. And Excel's goal is to be able to get data from all kinds of places and get it into one format so that you can manage it, create reports, all kinds of different things like that. So there's a couple different places we're going to talk about today that you can get data. Now there's 100,000 actual different places to get data, but we're going to focus on a couple specific ones today. I don't know if any of you have heard of flat files. Flat files are typically things like tab delimited or comma delimited files. Usually looks something like this. It's just a text file, but all of the columns and the column information is separated by a tab. You can see the tab separates the names of the column headers and the data inside of each column. Comma delimited files, these CSV files, are much the same. It's just all the columns are separated by a comma. So a flat file usually means a text or comma delimited type file or some other kind of separator. You'll see separators like pipes. You'll see separators like colons and semicolons, and even really weird things like I've had one that had ampersand separators. Excel can ingest all these types of files, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute. But so one of our sources for our data is a flat file, just usually an export from another system of data into kind of this flat structure that you can import into Excel. Another source for data is the web. You can, with Excel, you can actually go to websites, and if they have a table of data, you can usually grab that table right off of the website and just drop it into your Excel file. You don't have to copy and paste. You can actually create a link between your Excel file and the web page. Something similar to that is something called an API that you can also use APIs inside of Excel. They involve a little more work, generally involve some sort of authentication to get you access to data, but Excel has that capability as well. There are links to other sources using things we call drivers. There's ODBC drivers, OLDB drivers, and they generally link up to an assortment of databases. So server level solutions that are managing data for a company, inventory, sales, finances, that kind of thing. Excel has the ability to connect to those applications via these drivers. And then Excel can also connect to other Excel workbooks. So instead of copying and pasting files or data from another Excel workbook, you can just create a link to the workbook. It can connect to Microsoft Access and Microsoft SQL. Any questions about that? Okay, let's look at where it starts to get fun. Let's take some of these files and bring them into Excel. So I have two files here that I just made up. I have some item data. I have an item number and I have a location, say in a warehouse. And I have the number of that item that are in that location. And then I have another file that gives me the item number and also gives me the item description. So I don't know what 09852 means. So there's some sort of description. Oh, it's the tall one, whatever that is. So sometimes when you're trying to look at data, the number doesn't help you as much. You want to get a description in there. These two files differ in that the item number could be repeated possibly here because it could be stored in multiple locations in a warehouse. So you see 09852, 09852. But in this file, you don't typically repeat your item number because one item number is only going to have one description. This is a pretty standardized way of storing data. You'll see different attributes of different objects stored in different locations. And many times you need to find a way to bring those together for a report. You're going to send a report to CFO about your inventory. I don't know that he cares as much about the item number as he does about the item description. So we need to figure out how we can get this data to connect with this data because I want to see the item description next to the quantity. So I actually know what I'm talking about. So in Excel, under this data on the ribbon, you can see over here in get and transform data. There's a bunch of different options. I can get it from text, CSV. This is the flat files we were discussing. I can get things from the web, from just regular tables or ranges inside of Excel somewhere. Then a list of maybe recent sources you've connected to or existing connections. It gets deeper. You can go and look in databases here, your SQL database, your Access, even analysis service. You can even go to Microsoft Azure and get some data there. Just lots and lots of options. Let's just start with what it looks like to get data from a text file, one of these flat files. Now, this process uses something that used to be called, if you're familiar with Excel back in, I don't know, 2013 timeframe, they had something called Power Query. That is now just integrated into Excel. So if you ever used Power Query before, that is essentially what's going to happen here. We're going to go and find that file. Let's bring in the inventory quantity first. So I click on the file, and it's going to bring up this, excuse me, this Power Query box to kind of give me an idea of what my data is going to look like when I bring it in. So you can see it broke it out nicely for me. It put item number in a column, location in a column, quantity. It figured out that it was tab delimited. If it couldn't figure it out, you can choose. You can put in custom delimiters. The delimiter is the piece of data that separates all the objects. So if Excel couldn't figure it out on its own, you can obviously fix it. One thing it did do is it cut off my zeros. You can look at this file again, and you see all my item numbers begin with a 0. Now, first thing I'm going to say is never do this. Never have an object that begins with a 0. I do it here just to show the point that as you move data from, and this isn't just Excel, in all different applications, they don't like leading zeros. And I've worked at a bunch of places that did it not really knowing this, and it just causes a lot of headaches on the back end. So if you're ever making invoice numbers, order numbers, item numbers, any kind of serial identification, don't lead with a 0, just really bad practice. Always lead with some other numerical value. But in this case, it killed the 0. And so we say, well, what can we do about that? If everything looked good, we would just go ahead and load this, and it would drop this in as a table into our Excel file. But I'm going to click on Transform Data, and it's going to open up this Power Query window. And there's lots of options here. Don't get too lost in them. We're just going to focus on one really quick. I'm going to select my item number column, and I'm going to change the data type from, it decided this was a whole number. I'm just going to make it a text field. And it's going to say, are you sure? How do you want to do that? We're going to replace the current. There we go. I've got my 0 back. I had to change the data type. Excel thought it was numerical. I need to tell it that it's actually a text field. So we're going to take this, we're going to load it to my current existing workbook. And it's going to bring it in this nice little table. Now, you may say, why didn't I just copy and paste, right? Copy, paste. That was way faster. Why didn't I do that? I lost the 0, but I can show you how to fix that. The reason I didn't do that is because I wanted to create a connection. If I go to this file and type in 10 and save it, and then I go and I right click and I refresh my table, now it shows 10. So if my file ever gets an update, or if, let's say I get an inventory file every single day, I can just save over this file using the exact same name, inventory quantity tabular, and all the values, all the item numbers will change as this file changes. Because what Excel did was it created a connection between my Excel file and between this flat file right here. So even if you want to add another line, let's put that in 10B, 11 of them. We save it, we right click, we refresh. I've got that new line of data in there. So this is why we want to go through the process of bringing in the data using that data method up here. It allows us to create a connection so that every day when you get a new file, you're not copying and pasting. And there's more benefits that we'll explore as we move along, but that's just a really quick thing to see right now. Let's bring in that item master. Let's do the same thing with this guy. You can see it cut off my zeros again. We're going to transform the data. Change that to text. Yep, that's what I want to do. And then we'll load to, right here. So I have my two tables. Now, people who've used Excel a lot would say, well, now I can just use a nice VLOOKUP and get my item description next to my item number. Now, I purposely put the item number on the right side and the item description on the left side, because if you've used VLOOKUP before, you know that VLOOKUP can only look left to right. So if my item description was over here, great. I can put a VLOOKUP over here. I'm going to call this description. I could put a VLOOKUP here and return my item description. Everything would be good. But it's on that side. And obviously I could copy and paste it, move it over, but this is the way the file is given to me. I prefer not to do any more work than I have to do. Now to show, well, we'll do it this way the first time. So there's this new function, very recent, last couple months, that Excel's released that people have been asking for years, called XLOOKUP. This is a VLOOKUP, an HLOOKUP. It's any kind of lookup that you want. So much the same as a VLOOKUP, we first get to choose our lookup value. I want to look up the item number over here. And then I want, for the XLOOKUP, you list your array, meaning the area you want to search in. Well, I want to search in this item number area, right? And then you list the return array. What data do you want to return? So unlike the VLOOKUP, where you have to kind of create a table and it has to look left to right, this is more like a sum if, where you can say look up over here and return what's anywhere else that I want it to return. And I'll leave it at that for just a second. We'll talk about the other options involved here. We'll just put in our XLOOKUP, and there we go. We have our descriptions. Now, if you haven't done functions inside of tables before, this all may look a little confusing. You may be used to something that looks like, I'm going to look up from this field, and I want to look up over this area, I want to return this data. You may be used to something that looks more like that has references to cell areas. That's what XLOOKUP is going to do if you're not inside of a table. Inside of a table, it's going to handle expanding rows. So it's just saying, look at the item number from the given row, and then you look here, it says item master. This is the name of this table, the item master table. It's looking in the item master table. It's looking for all the records under item number, and then it's going to look at all the records for item description. And so if I get more values to either one of these tables, the XLOOKUP is just going to expand with each one. I don't have to rebuild it each time. So if I get some new information here, if I get another item, and I save it, and then I refresh this guy, it automatically expands it for me. It doesn't find anything because the item doesn't exist in my item master table. But if that was created in my item master, I don't know, the yellow one, and we refresh my item master, now it's just automatically updated it for me. So putting your functions inside of tables allows your functions to expand with your table. You don't have to manually move your function down for more lines of data that you've added. Now that was kind of a lot of stuff in a short time. Are there any questions about any of that? Okay.
I think it'd be helpful for me just to see the just the general basics of even a VLOOKUP.
Sure.
Because I know I tend to get confused on those.
Sure, absolutely. So let me copy and paste. Oh, oops. I'll show you this trick. So you see when I copied and pasted the data and it killed my 0, I'm going to highlight this column and I'm going to call it not general, but I'm going to format it as a text, and then I'm going to paste it in, and it kept my 0 this time. I forced Excel to not choose what to call that. If you bring it in and then try to set it to text, it won't work. It'll just set what it has left to text. You have to do it before the data comes in. So quick hint there if you're copying and pasting. Whoops. Oh, okay, so that's our first data set. Let's get our other one in here, master. Okay, so if we want to bring the description, let me do this. So we can do a nice, oh, I formatted the wrong one. You guys all probably noticed it and didn't tell me. Let me fix that. Okay, a VLOOKUP, we'll walk through this slowly, says give me a value that you want to look up that's inside of a different table. I want to look up this value right here in cell A2. Put it in there, press comma. Now I have to give it what's called a table array. I have to say from left to right, where is my lookup value? And then on the right side, where is my return value, right? This is a table array. It's going to look in I2 to J2. Obviously, I can make this as big as I want, because what Excel is going to do is look in anything in column I that matches what's in A2 and return what's in column J. So I'm making this big table array I2 to J8, I2 to J8. Comma, now I have to tell Excel which column I want it to return as my value. So I gave it a table array, but you don't always want the farthest right column to be the value that you're returning. In this case, we do. It's column index number 2, because in that table array, that I2 to J2, I only have 2 columns. It's not column 1, that's my lookup column. It's column 2, that's the one I want returned. And then I'll explain this in a minute. You always want to put false, but I'll explain that in just a second. Okay, so now I've got my value returned for 09852. It doesn't look too fantastic because it's the first one there, right? Typically, what you then try to do is drag it down. Now, you Excel wizards can tell me why I'm getting these values here. When you drag cell references inside of Excel, it's going to increment the references inside of the formula. So this is A2, J2, I8. Now it's A3, I3, J9. A4, I4, J10. So now I'm all the way down to here. I'm looking from I4 to J10. And I don't even have any data here, and it's going to miss anything for 09852. So instead of dragging and dropping my VLOOKUP, well, you have to do one of two things. You have to lock your references. I don't ever want this table to move. So I'm going to press F4 once, and that's going to lock both the column and the row, so it doesn't move when I drag that value down. And then I want to lock this other value as well, both the column and the row. I never want that table value to shift anywhere. And then on A2, you'll see why in a second, I'm going to lock the A. Not A2, but not 2, but just the A. So now when I drag and drop this, you can see that it finds all my values because I locked my cell references. It's always looking at I2 to J8. So it's going to go over, and where it says 09983, it's going to return short one. It says it sees a 09556, it's going to return blue one. I locked the A because occasionally I would also have other columns that I'd maybe want to return at some point. So maybe I want this VLOOKUP to also extend to ABC code. If I drag it over here, I can still reference A2. I just need to change this from J to K. And so it's going to look up from I to K in the third column. And now it's returning an A. Any questions? Are you following? This is kind of the idea of the table here is usually what throws people off. The table and then the serial column index number. This index number, this column index number, is just referring to the column number that you want returned. If here I had this I2 to K8 and I put a 1, it's going to return the item number because that's what's in column 1. And if here, even though I had I2 to K8, I put a 2, it's going to return the description. Because even though my table spans this much, I told it to only return column 2. Does that make sense? Silence is agreeing. So to take it, I guess, further, with your VLOOKUP, being able to return values from another table, again, VLOOKUP only works left to right. So I set up my table like this, I can only look to anything to the right of this item number. I can't look at this stuff to the left. Whereas XLOOKUP allows me to look left, look right, look horizontal, kind of whatever you need.
Michael, with the XLOOKUP, do you still need the match function like you would use in VLOOKUP?
Yeah, are you talking to true or false?
No, I just usually I use, instead of putting in the number in the VLOOKUP, the column number, I use match to make sure that if that column gets moved. Does that still apply to XLOOKUP?
It could, yeah. If that column got moved, you could still apply it there. Because the XLOOKUP, so I showed the example in the table. You don't have to worry about it in a table because the name of the column is always the same. But if you don't use it inside of a table, if we used it here, your XLOOKUP would just show cell references. So we look up in cell A2, my lookup array would be I. I'm just going to select the entire column here. And then my return array would be J. And you see that I'm still referencing actual columns. And so whenever you're referencing the columns, if that data moves, sometimes Excel's good enough that it will move the formula with you if it's simple enough. Sometimes it will not. But you see how this one, it used to be J, now it's K.
Okay.
Sometimes Excel will be able to move it for you. Sometimes it won't. If you're referencing entire columns, it generally does a pretty good job of moving data for you. Now, why reference entire columns? This makes dragging and dropping even easier than setting an absolute reference, locking in the reference here. Because if I just say, just look in column I and return anything in column K, it doesn't matter how many lines of data I add here or how many I have here, it's always going to be able to return a value because it's looking over the entire column. So I always encourage, instead of locking in, if you can, just reference the entire column, as I did here. So for the VLOOKUP in this case, it would look like this. Reference A3, but my table array is just going to be this entire area from I to K. And then I'm going to look up the third column in that area. Column false. And that way I don't have to lock anything in. It's just always going to work out for me. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I was just curious if the match could still be used in the XLOOKUP.
Yeah, it can.
But cool. Yeah, that does make sense though, what you're saying.
Now I said I'd explain what this false is. In a VLOOKUP, this says make it an exact match or make it an approximate match. If you leave out false, it's going to do what they call an approximate match, which is crazy. I don't know that people actually use that. But if I were to take this off and drop this down, you can see all these values that changed, and some aren't even returning values. For 09852, it's returning green one. Well, green one's way down here. VLOOKUP isn't sequentially, it depends on how you order your data, but it isn't always sequentially just looking from top to bottom. And it's just going to find something that looks like 09852. Well, 09 looks like 09852, so it returned green one. Sometimes when you run this, it's going to return fast one. If your data is very, very distinct, or if there are no duplicates, then this can work. But I made a really expensive mistake at work one day, not including faults into my VLOOKUP. So I would always encourage people to include faults into a VLOOKUP, just speaking from experience. Now, XLOOKUP does this automatically, which is another nice thing about XLOOKUp. You can see some of my other options here. You have match mode. If you just leave it blank, it's going to return exact match. One of the options XLOOKUP doesn't have is approximate match, which I think everybody realized that it really wasn't a very useful match. It has a mode that you can use wildcards. So you say it looks like 09 and then asterisk. So give me anything that's 09 asterisk. You can have that as a match mode, but it doesn't do just a general approximate match. It has this cool feature of if not found. So if I put another comma here, I can say if the value I have over there isn't found, I can type something in. And you can see I choose exact match, or next smaller item, next larger item, wildcard. Typically goes 0 unless I'm doing something really crazy. And then I can dictate how it searches. For the most part, you're not going to see a big difference between these. Some people try to do it for performance sake. And if you have very, very large data sets and the items are distinct enough, you maybe can save time. For the most part, you're not going to see a big difference. Typically, I just leave it blank and let it default to it searches first to last. So if this value was ABC, now it's going to tell me not found, because I had this little piece, hey, this is what you should return if you can't find a match. If you leave that blank, then it just returns an error as normal. Again, this is a really nice feature because for VLOOKUP before, you used to have to wrap a VLOOKUP inside of a if error function. And that was the only way to get the same functionality. Put your VLOOKUP in, and if that returned an error, the if error would handle it and return whatever value you wanted. Well, with XLOOKUP, they just took care of it all in one place and said, if it doesn't return a value, put in whatever you want. Right? Make your boss really happy. I'm awesome. Any questions about all that?
Well, that where you're typing not found, is it only text, or can you do another function in there, like NA parenthesis, for example, or? Yeah. Yep, you can do other functions. You can always nest more functions in there. Cool. Yep, works just like an if statement, essentially. That's cool. Yeah.
So is there any reason to continue using VLOOKUP or just go with XLOOKUP, because it looks like a lot better function to me?
Yeah, from my perspective, XLOOKUP. If there's a compatibility issue with older files that are still in heavy use, obviously there'd be questions there, but go forward. I only use XLOOKUP now. I don't see any reason to use VLOOKUP. It's just a lot slicker. It works a lot better. And again, this is fairly new. This is just in the last couple months. So you guys are going to be the first of the implementers. Okay, any other questions about that? A lot of good questions there. Again, I would encourage, though, where we did all this to kind of see the functionality just in the fields themselves, tables will really get you a long way towards speeding up how well you can handle and manipulate data. Again, this function will be dragged down every time I get new information, just automatically. It's going to happen. So It's not something I'd ever have to worry about again. If you don't like the table formatting, by all means, get rid of it. If you just like it to look like text, you can just format your table however you want. I'm not particularly fond of the green myself, but you know, whatever works. Use tables. They get a name automatically, so if you need a reference table, you can reference table names inside of functions. Just a lot of benefits from using a table. Okay. There's nothing more on that. Oh wait, just in case. Sometimes the wheels are still churning.
Mike, maybe you could just go over again the most common mistakes while using these lookups, and just if you know it's returning something, the first thing you should go look. And I know it's like, you know, did you put false in and did you lock it? Maybe that's all it is. But I know that I get errors a lot when I attempt this, and then I end up calling you.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. What do I do if I'm getting a value returned that I can see it should not be returned? If I double click on my function, it's going to highlight kind of generally what it's looking at. So if I wasn't able to use column references, let's say I was doing a VLOOKUP for a single cell. Sometimes you just need a single value returned. You don't need a bunch of values inside of a table returned. And I wanted to know, let's put a number there. Whoops. By the way, if you put a little asterisk, not an asterisk, apostrophe before you put a 0, that tells Excel that you're trying to type in a text piece. If I don't, I type 09852, it's just going to say, I know better than you, that's a number, I'm getting rid of the 0. So you have to tell Excel sometimes, no, I meant that 0 to be there, and you have to put it like that. If I'm typing a VLOOKUP here, and I'm going to look up against this, and I didn't do column references, I just did a specific area, because sometimes you're forced to, and that can happen. And let me just do this to give us an idea. And I'm going to do comma false. Right. I'm getting the, oops, I'm getting ahead of myself. 3. I'm getting an NA, and you say, you know, what's going on? A quick thing to do is just double click, and you say, oh, I didn't grab that piece, and now I got it. So first thing you got to do is check out where your references are. Make sure you're actually referencing what you thought you were referencing. That's a really quick thing to do. And sometimes it helps to recreate the function. Sometimes it helps to create the function in small increments. VLOOKUPs are kind of hard to create in small increments, but if you have a big function, you just got to sometimes take it out piece by piece and say, okay, I'm breaking everywhere. I don't know where I'm breaking. I'm going to just do it piece by piece until I can figure it out. Something that I always check when I'm working with other people's data is, let me add a space here. I added a space at the end. I just killed all those lookups I had because there's a space, but you can't tell. Something to do is just press F2. We talked about jumping in and editing cells. And you can see, now I can see, because the cursor is going to jump to the end, that I have a space there. Sometimes the space is at the beginning, which you can see here, but if this were to be centered, you wouldn't be able to tell nearly as well. Sometimes you can, sometimes it's really difficult. Again, F2, at the end I don't have one, but if I jump to the front, I can immediately see that I hit home to do that, by the way. I have a space. Get rid of the space, the VLOOKUPs are fixed. Check for spaces. This is a problem that plagues people just forever. Spaces end up at the beginning and ending of data all the time. It's crazy how often that happens. So check that the value you're referencing is actually the value you think it is. If Excel thinks that, let's say you have a 2 here, this looks like a number. But Excel actually thinks this is a piece of text, right? And you can see how they're formatted differently. One's on the right side, one's on the left side. And that's standardized formatting. Obviously, if you formatted this over here, you wouldn't be able to tell. But some functions don't like text values when it's looking for a numeric value or a generally formatted value. This one isn't even a number. Sometimes lookups won't work. They'll break if you have a text value and it should actually be a numeric value. So just things to check that the data actually is what you think it is. You make a lot of assumptions when you look at some data, and you need to make sure it fits out to what the assumptions are when you're looking at it. Is this actually the value that I think it is? I don't know. Those are just a couple of things off the top of my head that I can think of. It really is an iterative process if you have something failing. Also, one thing I highly stress, use Microsoft's documentation. Microsoft does a really good job of documenting Excel functionality. So take the Excel function you're trying to use and go look it up on Microsoft. Go even just Google it. There's so much good information online about Excel that sometimes you'll see that you were typing something in incorrectly that you didn't realize that you were. Check that you're doing the syntax correctly, that the function you're putting in is actually what it's supposed to be. Any questions with that? Okay. I'm trying to decide. I'm going to do it. I'm going to jump in and do something kind of big here, just to show capabilities. We've already shown how we can get data from text files. So let's get some more from a text file really quick. I'm going to pull something in from a CSV, this very large migration CSV file. Now you can, if I were to show you the data, immediately you'd see that Excel killed zeros here. It didn't kill them here. Sometimes Excel gets it right, sometimes it doesn't. We can fix all that. This is data showing state to state migration in the United States of America. So people moving from Alabama to Kentucky, or Alabama to Alabama, but different counties, or, kind of interesting data. This is an example of a very large data set. It's 450,000 lines. And the question always is, when you have these large data sets, what can you do with them? What's the story that you can tell? Let's transform this data just a little bit so I can kind of give you an example of how powerful Excel can be. First thing I'm going to do, because I know what my data is supposed to look like, I'm going to change this to text, and you'll see my zeros come back. I have all this data here, and I may want to know, the question I may ask is, how many people moved from Alabama to other states? And the only way I can kind of see that is I have to make sure that the state of A is not the same as the state of B, right? A to B, A is the first state they moved from, B is the state they moved to. That's kind of how they're designating this data. I might want to say, well, I don't care about the people who stayed in Alabama. I'm curious about all the people that left Alabama. How many were that? And I may need a way to identify that. Before I even bring this data into Excel, to my query, I can add a conditional column. So I'm going to put a function in, essentially. Sometimes you do this in Excel. You do an if function. If this column equal this column, say in state, else out of state, or something like that, right? But I'm going to do this before I even bring it into Excel. I'm going to say if the state name of A is the same thing as the state name of B, then I'm just going to put ones and zeros because I like binary, true and false. Else, so if they're the same, true, they are in state. If not, zero, they're moving out of state. and I added this column over here that I forgot to name called in state. And I may also be curious about if they were in county, if they went from the same county to the same county. So again, to A, let's do county equals county name of B. And again, make it true, else make it false. So now you can see there's some zeros, there's some ones. We'll see more about that in a minute. Let's go ahead and load this data to Excel. I'll just load it to my current spot here. And this is going to take a second because it is 450,000 rows. You can see it's starting to come in. And while we're working on that, I'm going to show you how to pull some data from online. Make sure I get the right data set. So here's an example of a table. You saw in my other data set, I only had state names. What if I wanted the abbreviation and I didn't want to type in a gigantic if statement? Well, I have this nice table here on this website that has them all laid out for me. Let's see if I can get that into Excel. 445,000, we should be loading it. This would be the day when my Excel would die on me. By the way, Excel can only handle just over 1 million rows. So this is about half of its capacity. You can see 1 million rows total. That's all Excel can handle. I can show you a way that we can use more than that. Data from web. I have that URL on my clipboard. I'm going to copy and paste it in here and say, okay, this is where I want to go. There's going to be a lot of there's connection options out there if you haven't already created the connection, which I've already created this connection. So I can look at the actual website right here in my window, but I want to look at the tables. Is this the table that I want? It's not. What it's doing right now is looking at the HTML of the website, and it's just looking for tables. There's a table. That's the table I want right there. And you can see it brought in column 1 and column 2 instead of the headers. Let's go and quickly transform that data. I don't want the names of my columns to be column 1 and column 2. I want the names to be state, position, and abbreviation. So I'm going to say use the first row as the header. And now I've got state, position, and abbreviation. Let's close, and we'll just close and load it, and it will pick a sheet to put it into. Now I have these two data sets. If I wanted, I could run an VLOOKUP, right, and bring the data over here. But there's a better way, especially with large amounts of data. If you go to your options, and you go to add-ins, and you go to, oh, my Excel is really dragging today. And then you go to your COM add-ins, you can see there's this option for Power Pivot. This, I've already enabled it for mine, and I've added it to my ribbon, so I can see this Power Pivot. I want to add these two tables to my data model. And that allows me to create a connection between the two data sets without using a VLOOKUP. I can just say, you see this column in this data set? It says state. Connect that to the column in the other data set that says state. And now I've created, instead of a VLOOKUP, I've created this cool join between these two tables so that if I want to see the migration numbers by state abbreviation, I can just pull in the different columns because I've joined them in the background using this data model here. Sorry, this is usually faster. My Excel is really having a difficult time right now. Let me add this other guy quickly to the data model. It'll be a lot faster, smaller. So now I have these two tables. my data model. I can look at them inside of a diagram. And I can say for state, we want A, not code name, not county, here we go. For state name A, let's connect that to the state possession, which is also the state name, right? And I'm going to create what they call this nice link. And this table, you notice, was just one state per abbreviation. So it's a 1, and the asterisk means many. So 1 to many relationship. I have one record over here that gets moved to a bunch of records over here. What I can do with that is create pivot table, essentially a report that will report on state migration by abbreviation. So you see I have all my fields here. This is from the one table. This is from the other table. I didn't get to a lot of this pivot table stuff, but I'll just kind of show you what's possible here. I can bring in the state abbreviation, and then I can bring in, I want the net amount, net estimate. And this is net migration inside of each one of those states. But you can see I don't have an abbreviation in this table here. The abbreviation only exists in this table, but it still allows me to report on both tables at the same time because I made this nice connection in the background with my data model. This is really good for large data sets because this connection in the background runs a lot faster than a VLOOKUP, permanent VLOOKUP. So if these two tables are data updates that I get regularly, I don't want my VLOOKUP to have to recalculate over 450,000 rows each time I get my new data set. That can take a whole lot of time. But if my data set gets refreshed back here in the data model, the connection here gets refreshed as a part of it, and it works a whole lot faster than a VLOOKUP or an XLOOKUP or anything else does. And the nice thing about connecting to the website here is that if any of this data changes, which fascinatingly enough, state abbreviations do change every, I don't know, 40 years, even look at the history, but this would automatically update. I just have to refresh it. So long as that web page is active, I just refresh it, and this data would automatically get refreshed. I never have to worry about manually updating it myself. And so I could always have this report be up to date. Now, I see we're out of time. I'm willing to stay on and answer some more questions if you have any about all that. I know that was a ton of stuff in a short period of time. Just trying to give you an idea. I mean, this didn't even kind of break into how powerful the pivot tables are. Again, you can see all the records that existed in this table, and I was able to summarize them by state just by bringing these two fields into a pivot table. I didn't have to write a sum if statement. It's just really quick, really effective. So any questions about any of that?
Michael, what is why would you use the power pivot over just a regular pivot table, inserting a pivot table for that?
Yeah, so if I just inserted a pivot table for this data set, I would not have been able to bring in the state abbreviation. So my option would have been to run a VLOOKUP into this table, or an XLOOKUP now, and bring in the state abbreviation into this actual table, and then run my pivot table off of this table here. And that's something you can do. The purpose was to show how this way of connecting the tables in the future is just going to be much more performant than a VLOOKUP or an XLOOKUP will be. So always having these tables as part of your data model and joined using a join here is a much more performant method of reporting on your data. So again, for large data sets, if you're running 1,000 lines, it's not a huge deal. But if you're running 450,000 lines, then it is a big deal. And the other piece about Power Pivot is Excel allows just over 1 million rows. In Power Pivot, you can have 1.9 billion rows. let me look it up here, make sure I got that right. Yeah, 1.9 billion rows. So Power Pivot allows you to have 2.1 billion tables with 2.1 billion columns and 1.9 billion rows. Just immense amounts of data that you could not actually handle inside of Excel itself. When you start to use Power Pivot, the only thing that's going to limit the size of your data sets really is going to be your own machine. So if your machine doesn't have a good processor, not a lot of RAM, it's not allowed. If you're running 32-bit somehow, you're only going to be able to save certain sizes of files. But if you're ever running with big data and you have over 1 million lines of data, you need to start using Power Pivot. Does that help?
It does. I guess I've never used Power Pivot before, and I've never had 1 billion rows of data either.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Maybe
again,
one day I'll grow up, I guess.
Yeah. And again, large data sets, it's going to be effective instead of VLOOKUPs, XLOOKUPs. Those take a minute to calculate, whereas the relationships you create in your Power Pivot relationship view, these take no time at all. This isn't a calculation that needs to be made. So if you're struggling with performance with your VLOOKUPs, you may want to consider it. Otherwise, it's very powerful, but it's also very databasey. So if you have a lot of tables, if you are getting stuff from databases, if you want to get out of Access because Microsoft's moving away from Access, Power Pivot really is kind of the replacement for Microsoft Access in a much more user-friendly environment. What else? What other questions? See if I can. Oh, I can't. Show you this just for fun as you're thinking about new questions, if you have any. I'm going to bring this data out of my pivot table because Excel doesn't like it. In the pivot table, I'm going to insert map. Oh, but we don't want Puerto Rico. We'll put Puerto Rico in there. Yeah. And it created a nice heat map of migration in the United States. Let's give it a heat color. You can see the lighter colors are states that people are leaving, and the darker ones are states people are moving to. And all that in just a couple quick seconds from this massive piece of data that we had. Yeah, so if there's nothing else,
will that chart automatically update if those tables update?
Yes. Now, charts can be a little tricky. Some charts work based off of pivot tables. You can't actually create a map off of a pivot table. So what I did was I took my pivot data and I just essentially copied it with relative references. E4 is always going to equal B4. So if this value gets updated from a new data set, this value is going to change and my chart will automatically update.
Awesome. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and this is kind of a basic map that Excel offers, where I showed you Power Pivot as an add-in. There's another add-in that I have not messed around with a lot, but it's pretty powerful. It's called Power Map. If you want to get really into that kind of cool maps and stuff, that would be something to mess around with. But this gives you a nice beginning anyway. It's kind of fun. Yeah. Any other thoughts, questions? If anybody, I'm open to answering any questions anybody has in the future. Let me put my email up here. If you just want to, ping me a question about anything I talked about today, or if you have any other questions, go ahead, send me an email. Totally willing to answer, any quick questions. See if we can, if I can, obviously. I meant to say at the beginning, I think there was a group at a prestigious university that did a study on the number of ways to do things in Excel, and it was like on average you could do the same thing 7.5 different ways. And I just made that up right now. But there are 100,000 different ways to do the same thing in Excel, and so there are things that even the best users don't even know you can do. Excel is just an incredibly powerful tool that does a lot of things. So if you have any questions, feel free to ping me. I will do my best to answer. Google is always a great resource for Excel. Again, it's so widely used. There are just documents everywhere on almost anything you can think of that people have done inside of Excel. But yeah, feel free. Otherwise, if there's nothing else, if anybody else wants to chime in, we are done. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Mike.
Hopefully that was helpful.
Appreciate it, Michael.
Thank you, Michael.
Okay, thank you. We'll see y'all. Have a good day.